Welcome to this week's episode of Revenue Hacks, where we'll be focusing on pricing. So pricing strategies, price positioning, and also a few looks at some new pricing models. So without any ado, let me go into the introductions for the speakers this week. So we have with us Christina Ridge. Christina, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everybody, back again for another week. As you all know, I'm a Group Revenue Manager for JMK Group, private-owned hospitality company in the UK and Ireland.
And Nick Moffat. Nick, you go ahead and give us a few bits of information about you.
Hi, thanks for inviting me along. So my name is Nick Moffat, Group Director of Revenue Management and Distribution for Easy Hotel. So we look after 40 hotels across the continent and have 13 owned hotels, soon to be 15.
Thanks very much. And last but not least, myself, I'm Ali Northfield from Revenue by Design, and welcome everybody to the show. So first up, so just looking at pricing and starting from the top, typically people will create a framework for pricing. Typically that's known as a pricing grid. So so what does a pricing grid need to feature? So where are we going with it? What kind of data does it need to feature, and how would you prepare one? What would be your main approach? Chris, any thoughts?
When I deal with price grids, and everyone kind of says it's a bit Jurassic, but a lot of the systems are now using price grids again. If you look at different brands, they're using them. The main focus is a demand calendar. You need to know what's going on in your area before you start making all these pricing. You need to strategically look at the cost per room and also the rates in your area, your comp set, look at your STR year on year, and then go from there. Typically a pricing grid would normally have about 12 different price lists in there, you know, bar level 1 to 12, that's at a max. You know, if you look at the Hampton by Hilton brand, Nick, you're very familiar with this, they only have 7 levels or 8 levels if you go from 0 to 8. And obviously you need to have the correct structure in there for your bar rates, because the last thing you want is to create a price grid that starts at £59, but then the gap between your next rate level could be £15 or £20. So you need to be very smart in how you're going with this. Some people have 2 to 3 different bar levels. I would recommend that you have one set bar level from 1 to 10, and then have seasonal rate levels built in there that you can actually pull in when needed, because it just makes more sense to have seasonal rates. Not that we need them at the moment, but you know, from a future point of view, when demand does pick up in events or in your area, you don't have to stick to a £299. You can actually have these seasonal rates you can pull in.
Okay, and Nick, do you think the price grid works in today's market, or how well has it worked for you in the past?
I'm going to throw it on its head a bit. I'm going to say, actually, free flow pricing is the way forward at the moment.
Okay.
So I'm looking, certainly the way we're working at Easy Hotel, you know, our system is set up now just to price. There's no bar rate levels in there. We have a minimum rate that we go to, which I've signed off. And actually, whilst I know a lot of people might think that I'm the cheapest in the market, I've pushed that up year on year. So even in COVID times, we're actually seeing rate growth against the market, and also delivering the occupancies that we need. So, you know, I want to untie the system, and I want to allow the system to put the price in the right place for us. Okay,
so Chris, so if we're saying that that perhaps in today's market, price point recommendations might be better. What benefit do you see to still having a pricing grid with a fairly structured framework around it? Is there a communication element in here in order to communicate the pricing strategy to the rest of the team, or how does that work?
I think having a pricing grid like that is very, very good, especially when you've got sales managers on the ground at the moment, or if you have a revenue/sales person, because a lot of people are still on furlough. So if you have a grid like this, you're actually able to segment everything out for next year. So you're able to say, this is the price point for groups. You can give this group rate. This is the price point for corporates or a long stay guest who may be coming in. You're able to give this, because at the moment, what we're seeing across the UK and Ireland and across the world is that people are just constantly dropping the rate, liquidating the rate, rather than actually making smart strategic decisions. And if you're going to constantly give a long stay, the frontline workers rate, which could be 20-30% off par, then you're liquidating yourself midweek when it's the one chance that you might be able to make revenue. Because on weekends, everyone knows we're going to be busy on weekends because people are still traveling on weekends. They do want to kind of get away from home, be it stay somewhere else or, be able to stay somewhere within their city. I'm guilty of that. But, it allows you to make that smart decision. In particular for next year, we need to focus on the here and now for sure, but we also need to be looking at 2021. We're not saying demand will return. We know that demand probably won't return anytime before March of next year. However, we need to be smart in how we're structuring ourselves, because if you look at brands, for instance, brands want us to drop our rate, drop everything, bring ourselves in line with the market to be able to pick up volume, to either increase our occupancy or to be able to kind of save the RevPAR. But they're not looking at it from a strategic decision for 2021. So they're asking us to rejig our RFPs, rejig our GT rates, which are our group transient rates, but there's no real focus on when that will end, if you get me, for next year. So having that allows us to actually be able to do some sort of revenue management.
Okay. And so, Nick, do you use a revenue management system? So, and is a pricing grid relevant in those circumstances? Obviously, you're using free pricing. But
we're with Duetto. We're using Duetto, and as I say, we've got some elements of rules in Duetto which allow the system to go to a certain level, and if it sees strong pickup, we have another established level, which would be an event level that pushes up. But generally speaking, we're trying to let the system do what it sees best. And actually, we're quite happy with the recommendations, even post-COVID, coming out of the system. I've got revenue managers who can override and who can amend the rules as well. So, we're trying to manage a little bit more by exception. But in the sector that we're in, the economy sector, I think in some respects, we are shorter lead and governed a little bit by the competition with the bigger players in terms of what price points would be out there.
Sure. So that sort of leads me on to I think just in summary of that, there's definitely a requirement for a framework for communications, but when you have a revenue management system, perhaps that's not as full a requirement as necessary, because you've got the system that will do that, but you still have structure in the back of your system, Nick. So it leads me on to really the next element, which is price positioning. So you've got your framework for pricing, which I guess is the external or the external reference points for pricing, but what kind of price positioning techniques are you using, bearing in mind, let's just mention a few, so penetration pricing, surrounding, skimming, premium, undercutting, matching? Which one of these very popular pricing strategies really appeal to you, Nick? So what's worked for you and what hasn't worked, and what are the pros and cons?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people will say Easy Hotel would be usually one of the cheapest out there, that would be going after volume over rate. Actually, I would say that I've turned that around a little bit, although COVID has kind of put pay to that, and I've increased the minimums that we'll go to. I've seen some competitors actually going lower than us, and I don't want to follow them. So right. I've instructed my guys, don't follow them, because I just believe that in the market, there are only certain people that are willing to travel at the moment. And price point is not the key decider in all instances. I think the biggest problem that we face at the moment is the lack of demand. And certainly if all the competitors drop their rates down super low. All we're doing is giving away our profit margins.
Okay, so would it be fair to say that perhaps initially the brand was seen as operating a consistent like penetration type strategy where you're, or maybe even undercutting, but now you're moving into a more stable pricing strategy where you've got some kind of value proposition that you're adhering to? Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, we're still a sort of an economy low cost operator for sure. That's exactly what we are. But we also need to keep our, our cost bases. We don't have a lot of staff on property. We need to continue to challenge our costs because at the end of the day, we're looking at profitable revenue management and not just about sort of filling the hotels. Right now, I think we're still on a dominantly volume-led strategy, as I think a lot of people will be at the moment. But we're not necessarily always looking to undercut everybody.
Okay.
We want to put sensible pricing in the marketplace, especially when the product and the location is actually probably better than some of the competitors.
Okay. I think, so sorry, Chris, to cut you off there. I think certainly for people struggling in the market now where there are there's a lot of competition to capture demand at any cost. I think having the courage to stick to a value proposition which represents a longer term strategy is a good thing, albeit sometimes you just need heads on beds. So Chris, tell me about some strategies that have worked for you. It looks as though we've lost Christina. So Nick, do you have any other, so in terms of just other strategies that you would advise people on at the moment? So we've got the value proposition of trying to keep the proposition the same. Oh, Christine's back. Are you back, Chris? So are you here?
Yeah, I don't know what happened. Tech issue.
That's okay. I was going to ask Nick another question, but I thought it was unfair. So strategies that have worked for you in the past?
Funny enough, Nick mentioned about, penetration and undercutting and just everything. We're rolling with a penetration. However, there's being smart with your rates. I'm sure Nick will be the first one to attest to this, is that you can actually undercut the market on 2-3+ night stays if you're doing it smartly rather than looking at the here and now. Because what the comps that are looking at the moment is actually looking at your bar rates on the day, probably maybe a little bit of a discount if you're doing something. But if you're smart, you can get that long stay guest for the future by undercutting the market on the 2, 3, and 4 night stays for sure, and definitely 10+ nights. And I think that's a great way of actually being able to have long stay guests, but also it cuts your cost down, because how many times do you have to clean the room in that time that people are staying? Because of COVID, it's very little, and we're at that time now where we can actually optimize everything on the 2 and 3 and 4 night stays by actually discounting a little bit further than what we would have done in the past. There's a lot of people in a lot of the markets who need to stay long term, and it's about being able to optimize them people rather than letting them go into apartments. And that's a really good strategy to adopt when you're looking at it for the future, because again, it just cuts down your cost of sale, it cuts down in your cost per room, and at the end of the day, your RevPAR is still protected in a way, and you're able to yield from there because you're able to actually increase the price or drop the price based on the demand. So there's still that little bit of element of revenue management. We're doing that at the moment in a few of our properties, and it's working quite well for us. In particular, in one property in central London, it's actually working a storm. The one thing about it is that brands seem to be pushing, and I'm sure Nick will join me in this one, not from Easy Hotels side, but brands seem to be pushing a lot of promotions. There's a lot of international brands there who just seem to do promotion after promotion after promotion. One is doing a 3 for 2. The same company is doing 5% off bar. Now they're running with a 30% flash sale off advanced purchase. You need to kind of realize what works well for the customer and what works well for the property, and it's not a one-hat-fits-all. And that's where Nick was right when he's saying his revenue team override everything, because they realize that one particular hotel could do very well, but the other hotel doesn't on that particular strategy. And that's something that we're pushing. Now, unfortunately, we are doing a 3 for 2 in one of our properties at the moment. It is a branded property, but it's our only source of business. That's tough when you're in a market like that, because all the comps that are doing it. So we've had no choice but to jump on that bandwagon. Mm-hmm. It is liquidating the rate a little bit. We are getting a little bit more in regards to volume. However, it still comes with its issues because you do have undercutting in the market, especially actually on the B2B partners and the wholesalers and OTAs, which is a fight that we're constantly battling. I'm sure Nick is in the same position.
Yeah, I think yeah, Nick, you were saying actually that undercutting, but its definition is where a supplier goes out into the market and sells rooms at less than cost, and with a view to actually destroying the market or removing certain players within the market. And Nick, you were just mentioning that you've seen some crazy rates out there at the moment. So there is definitely undercutting going on. Any thoughts about the longevity of that?
I think it's not sustainable, really, is it? It's, you know, at the end of the day, right now, revenue managers need to earn their pay packets, and they will. You know, we're one of the, I think, one of the most important disciplines in terms of trying to get the hotels back open and make them sell profitably. Yeah, you know, and at this particular point, you know, if it's a race to the bottom, who is going to win is only the person with the lowest cost base, right? And they're really not going to win much either, you know. So I suppose in the brand I'm in now today, and I've worked in 4 stars and 5 stars, I've done the whole lot, big brands, medium brands, and so forth. In the brand I'm in today now, my price position is probably, you know, at the bottom of the market, but I will hold a certain point because I think, you know, after that point, there's no integrity and there's no demand generated at, like, I don't know, £15 a room or something. You know, this is just ridiculous. Yeah, we're heading to, you know, the work that revenue management people have done over the past 3 or 4 years in a place like London, building the rate up. You know, we had some really good years, and I think we're really at risk of destroying all of that if we don't stick to some level of integrity.
I think that to Nick's point is it's very much a rate strategy rather than an actual strategic proper decision being made. There's no real thought in the background. I just think everyone's going, well, Crown Plaza's gone £5 under me. I need to drop another £3 to be under them. You know, you need to, and we've said this in Revenue Hacks a number of times, you need to find that position in the market where you're happy to sit and stay there and use the different levels that you're able to use and different discounts you're able to use to optimize on that, because you just don't want to be that one person that's going to be blamed for creating a rate war in your area. Even though it's probably not you, the finger always points back towards you, and you just don't want to have that bad name. It's a bad reputation for you and your property as a revenue manager when it looks that the only thing you can do in your mind is dump a rate. It just shows that you're not really strategic and dynamic and you're not able to adjust to how the market is.
And so that sort of brings me on to some messaging in the market that there's a new mega trend emerging, which is the trend of the subscription model. So and I'm just wondering whether or not this model has some legs for the hotel industry. So there are certainly a couple of hotel companies that are using this at the moment, and the sort of overview of the model tends to be that you have an enrollment fee, potentially a monthly fee for belonging to in the subscription environment, plus some level of cap. Typically, if you look at what's out there at the moment, there's a level of cap on the number of rooms that are available within that subscription model, with the benefit to hotels that that there is an ability for these particular companies running these models to drive demand to specific hotels based on customer attributes. So if you, for example, if you have a bunch of foodies in Italy, then they would go to hotels in Italy, sign them up, and then you'd be able to buy into those hotels through your subscription model. So what do we think of this sort of monthly payment methodology versus a typical pay-as-you-go, which is what we're doing at the moment? So any thoughts on whether this might benefit the hotels or perhaps one sector such as the long stay sector? Or any where do you sit, Nick, on this one?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting concept. Look, I'm open for trying anything at the moment. You know, I mean, this is unprecedented times call for unprecedented actions, in my view. Yeah, so it's definitely worth trying. I think it might work well in, say, the leisure markets. Obviously, you know, I think that's mainly the market we're talking about here. You know, and I've seen it before in certain other iterations, like through some of the loyalty schemes of the big brands, where, you know, you can buy points and, you know, pay a certain amount of points per month and redeem those points against stays. So it's not something that's completely new to us, but I think, you know, being out there with it a bit more, especially with sort of more funky brands in a way, and sort of leisure focused brands, I think there could well be a benefit. I think it depends on the location, on the properties that you're talking about, as to whether it will actually work.
Do you think that it's a good methodology for just building base business, so that you're getting something in that guarantees you a certain level of occupancy throughout the year, or is this something that just, and so you'd have other models sitting on top of that, or do you have better ways of getting your base business in, Nick?
I think probably for, some of our hotels are in locations like, let's be honest, Milton Keynes, Croydon. You're probably not going to get many people subscribing every month to want to go and stay in those locations. So, for us, we're certainly focused on different market segments that drive the lead time further out. Yeah. So I think maybe for us, it would only work in certain properties. We've got probably Barcelona and Nice and places like that. Okay. So I don't think it's necessarily a one size fits all. Yeah.
Would you just, so before I come to you, Chris, so would you hook up to a program that was running it? So if it was another third party, so for example, there's for example, the typical third party promotion providers like Secret Escapes, if there was another model like that, I mean, certainly I think Be Right Back in the UK has that type of approach. Would you be keen to test it out, and how would you manage the whole situation?
I actually like the idea, I really do, and I definitely have explored the option. We're in particular times in general where we can actually generate stays. The way I look at it is, it's almost like a member deal. It's very much like membership, where you actually collect your points and you can redeem it for night stays. You can cap it. It's like capping it in a rate level, either in Best Western or an IHG or Marriott or any international brand, Hampton. It doesn't matter. You can cap it. And it's a really cool way of generating your own loyal customers. And having that, the way I look at it is, and Suzanne would probably be shaking her head in agreement, is it's building that database that you're able to actually push out marketing to these people. And you're better off doing it direct rather than actually doing it through a third party, only because you can actually manage it a lot better. You can build your levels in Duetto, for instance. When you get to a certain occupancy, it shuts it out. But also, you kind of cut out the middleman and you're able to control it a lot more yourself. And I would be very much for that subscription. I think it's a really good way of pushing length of stays, and £20, I know that's what the coffee is, but if you even bring it up just a small bit, it's kind of in and around what the prices are in London at the moment, £35, £30. I've seen hotels go down to, branded hotels in city centre go down to £20 for rooms, and that's an international chain. And you're like, what are you doing? How? And especially when the cost per room is kind of increased. Obviously, you're losing out the service cost, but at the same time, it's a smart way of generating revenue. I remember during Revenue Hacks, Ali, I think it was you who mentioned it, that someone in Ibiza hotel was actually, you were able to book out the hotel for a certain price for the whole time. I think this was in the early days. And I thought that was very, very cool and very interesting. And it's a great way for people to be able to secure a space privately for a family event or a family gathering, and knowing that, they're safe. Because if you look at hotels, in particular in Ireland, we've been open since the 29th of June. There has been no clusters associated with COVID-19 in a hotel in Ireland at all, full stop, which is a really good testament to say, compared to other industries, there's been huge amounts of, virus being spread across people, whereas hotels are safe. We are safe. And I think it's a great way of putting it out there to people that if you can't afford to stay right now, that's grand. But there's other ways you can actually build up points to actually stay with us in the future. And we're ready for you and waiting for you for when you do want to come back to us.
I think this is similar to, we've got some comments here from Sylvia and Sylvia Cantarella and Niels Meckenkamp. Both of them are saying really this is the subscription model is sort of a loyalty program reimagined. And very complex to run, and I think from a marketing perspective, like hugely challenging to just and quite a drain on resources if you're having to continually manage the churn of subscriptions. It's not just gaining the subscriptions in the first place; it's actually then managing that churn from a marketing perspective, which can be quite a drain on resources. And to your point, Chris, I think using a third party to do it would just be like going down the same old road again, like, third parties. So and there's a danger of losing the validity in that, and losing the direct business opportunity. So I think for now, as a move towards getting more direct, I think there's no harm in trying it. But you're right, Nick. I think long term it might be challenging. So just before we close up, anything in the news that Nick, that you've seen this week that's worth talking about, that's hit you hard? Not mentioning anything particular. Anything?
I think it's no surprise really that I think certainly I and the people I've spoken to from other companies as well, we see a bit of a slowdown. Whenever there's change in the sort of COVID restrictions and lockdown areas and regions, and I think. Look, I think this is a temporary thing. People need to understand what they can do, where they can go, etc. So, we shouldn't necessarily knee-jerk our rates because of that. That's my view. Obviously, it's up to everybody else what they do with their pricing. But yeah, I mean, other than that, it'd be nice to see some positivity, wouldn't it? At this point, trying to encourage people to actually get out and do something. But we are in tough times.
Yeah. Chris, do you want to take Gabby's question, which is how do you see pricing for the winter season, and your wrap up, just seeing, do you see this moving on, or do you see a let up for us at all?
Well, certainly the 3 for 2 with the international chain has been extended until 31st December 2020. So they don't expect anything to change. I think what's going to happen is the pricing will be very similar to what it is now. We're almost pricing as winter anyways. And I'm sure Nick will agree with that one. Anyone who has hotels across the world would know that. I just think it's about being smart with it and actually playing with your rates. As I mentioned, having longer length of stay discounts properly in place that are opaque even, or that are hidden, because your competitor is not going to shop that right now. And it's a great way for you to generate revenue futuristically. I don't think we're going to go any deeper than what we are now. I really don't think we're going to go back to, in Ireland, in particular in Dublin, at the time of the recession, the rates actually started at 30 euros in the city centre. And when certain parts of Dublin are quiet, then particular hotels, it's bleak, it's a ghost town. And I really don't think they're going to go back to that, because as Nick said, we spent 5 years trying to generate really good revenue in Dublin and in London and in Paris and Amsterdam and Barcelona. And all these knee-jerk reactions are just liquidating that away. That's going to take 5 to 10 years for everyone to come back to normal. Mm-hmm. I think people need to realise the numbers that you've seen in the past are gone. Don't be looking at numbers for 2019. Don't look at the numbers for 2018. All that business is gone, because what we're seeing key players in the travel industry actually falling now because of this situation. We've seen job losses, but we're also seeing offices close, companies fold. And I think we need to be very mindful of that when we're actually quoting for everything for next year. You don't have to quote silly rates just to get business. You need to realize that you have a budget and a strategy that you need to follow, and trust yourself and your strategy and your pricing. Trust the gut pricing that you have, because that's the only way. If you can't stand by your pricing, then you shouldn't be in your job. Put it that way, or else you should have someone else making that strategic decision for you.
Yeah, sure. So summary for today is pricing grids. You still need them even if you've got a revenue management system, but they're there for more of a communication if you have it. Price positioning, if you're working on a 3 for 2, or if you've got a hotel near any of Chris's, look out for the 3 for 2 on your rate shopper. So just do a minimum length of stay of 3 or 2, and then you might pick it up. And definitely the subscription model is one that has legs, but is quite a drain on resources. So and more like a loyalty program. So that brings us to pretty much the end of this session. So thanks everybody for joining, and thanks for your great comments and your questions. Much appreciated. Don't forget to join us next week. And also don't forget to follow WHTT on LinkedIn. So if you're around tomorrow at 2 p.m. BST, you can tune in for WHTT's mini series, 5 episodes on valuing different women in the workplace. And also we are conducting a survey to measure women's voice in the hotel and travel tech sector. So it's on the screen now, at the bottom of the screen. So do use your voice and fill out the survey. And that brings us to the end of this episode. So thanks very much for joining us. Thanks, Chris, and thanks very much for joining us, Nick. That was great. Really appreciate your input. So cheers and goodbye. Thanks.